Hello again to all subscribers and listeners of this channel. You are listening to Obsidian Radio, and right now I will be reviewing Season 4, Episode 2 of Attack on Titan, entitled Midnight Train. And this was a much slower episode that built up many of the new characters within the series. A lot less action, but very good development of characters like Zeke, Reiner, Gallier, Gabby, and Falco. So without further ado, let's get to this. So my first thoughts were that this was an interesting episode showing more and more of the characters' development, as well as examples of some I think it was a little bit cringy yet unintentionally hilarious scenes. Scenes that only further enforce the troubled mental state of so many main characters. So as far as the plot, the episode starts out with Marley's military leaders discussing the problems they're facing with their Titans. They're basically worried that other military forces around the globe are creating more weapons that can not only withstand the power of the Titans, but can even damage the Titans that they use for their military conquest. At the end of the meeting, Zeke proposes that they start another mission to go back to Paradis Island, so that way they can acquire the founding Titan to strengthen Marley. We next see Reiner, Porco, Peak, all discussing the battle at Fort Slava. Porco's being aggressive, annoying, and arrogant, and is blaming Reiner for things that, as far as I'm concerned, not really his fault. Reiner is traumatized, having a lot of nightmares about what he went through, and Peak is being very kind and understanding. Something that I'm starting to really like about her character as I see more of her in the series. We then see the cadets, the younger ones who are getting ready to take on the mantle of the Titans later on. We see them meet up with Reiner at the beachfront, the four of them. What were their names? Udo, Falco, Zofia, and Gabby. They're all meeting with Reiner at the beachfront. Then later on they go into the train where Gabby, a young girl who's like 11 or so, is getting drunk in the train car with a bunch of drunken grown men and some traumatized teenagers who just came back from a war literally less than a day ago, which I find insane, but whatever. Falcon and Reiner have an intense discussion about how he can protect Gabby and how he can find a way to inherit the Armored Titan in her place. The next day, when they get off the train, we see them all meeting their family at home. Soon after Reiner and Gabby tell their war stories of what happened in the last battle. Gabby is so excited about her story, yet Reiner was odd and unintentionally funny about how he told his story about what it was like on Paradis Island, which that was just genius writing. That was really awkward. Then the Titans of Marley, all the warriors, they get together as Zeke tells them in what they assume is a private conversation. He tells them that they need to secure the founding Titan by going back to the Paradis Island. The top of Marley's military is actually listening to this entire conversation in secret with Stuka microphones bugged into the room. The final scene is when Reiner is cursing out loud. He's cursing the island, and he proclaims that he has to go back to that island. And that's how the episode ends. So here's some interesting things that I noticed. So, 1. Am I the only one who finds it a bit troubling that there is alcohol, young kids, teenagers, a drunk young girl, as well as the fact that they're all together on the same train car, they're all surrounding her, getting more and more drunk as they're partying into the night? I thought that was a bit odd, although one could argue that them being child soldiers is already a bad thing, so I guess them getting drunk on the train is not that big of a deal. Whatever. I still thought that was kind of weird. Number 2, I noticed that the rotoscoping, and I'm going to link to it in the description, in this episode, it's being used with Zeke and Colt's conversation. It was used with Gabby and Reiner's conversation with their family. There's a couple other scenes where it's being used. And it's the animation technique where the animation team is actually drawing each frame based off of real life objects or real life people and how they move. And it looked odd at first, but I quickly got used to it. So it's a little bit less detailed, but it tends to have a more fluid look to it when they're moving. It's oddly smooth. It doesn't really bother me that much, so yeah, I think it's alright. So yeah, the more I watched it, the more I got used to it. And like I said, I got used to it very quickly. Number 3, right after Reiner finished telling his story, there's a man who jumped from a roof. Now I did a little bit of research. Apparently he's supposed to be just a background character that displays what's going on mentally with the different soldiers. But for a while, I wasn't sure who that was or if he was someone important. And if you go back and check the episode, right after the Reiner and Gabby having that conversation walking somewhere, there's people gathering around the crime scene where the guy committed suicide. A little bit before that, you actually see the guy jump off the roof during the lightning storm. So I guess he was kind of a background character or whatever. Number 4, Reiner's story about the scout cadets on Paradis Island. Again, that was oddly touching. It was dark yet hilarious all at the same time. If you listen closely to how he was speaking, you can kind of tell that he doesn't really hate them. He doesn't really mean anything he said. But he had to come up with something to tell his family about what he thought of what I think were Sasha, Aaron, Jean, Connie, etc. And how he's trying to make them look bad as much as he can, even though you can tell he doesn't really think that. So it was just a really odd but very well written scene when you look at it closely. And it just shows you just how interesting a character Reiner is. How he's very deep but also very much a broken man on the inside. Number 5, as far as the Warriors, Reiner's getting all my empathy and sympathy when it comes to what he's been through and what he's done, what he regrets. Zeke is deserving of respect, as far as I can see. Peak is adorable, and she comes across as this very likable, very endearing character. I also like her voice. I didn't get the voice actress's name, but the way they placed the voice for her, I think, was a very nice choice for that character. It's a slightly raspy, but very soothing, very calming voice that her character has. I like it. Porco, on the other hand, interesting name. I'm not liking this character at all. He's coming across as this arrogant, not likable, hot-headed, and very annoying character who has no idea what Reiner's gone through, who is just comes across as very stubborn, very immature, and he comes across as thinking way too highly of himself when it comes to this situation, as far as I'm concerned. Marcel, what he did was his choice. That wasn't Reiner's fault ultimately, but again, because of his overly angry, overly aggressive behavior, Porco just didn't see it. So again, his character's just not, he's throwing me off a lot. I'm not really feeling him at all. Also, there was an interesting thing that he said to Reiner when they were having the discussion after Reiner woke up from his nightmare. If that's not the real Reiner, if the bossy, determined, strong, intense Reiner is not the real Reiner, what is the real Reiner actually like? Have we seen any of that so far? It's very interesting what that character would be like if he never took on that leadership role to replace Marcel. Number 6, the last bits of dialogue. Okay, I think I did figure this out, but let me go ahead. Dialogue at the end where McGath says, "I just wish Zeke had thrown that comment in," unquote. I'm thinking, what comment was he talking about? And then at the very end, where Reiner thinks to himself, quote, "None here in this room, huh?" And what is he talking about? And then I think I get what he's talking about. I think he's talking about at the beginning of the discussion where Zeke's like, "There's no one in this room except us." I think Reiner knew that Zeke might be lying, and I think McGath was not comfortable with what Zeke was saying because that gives off the idea that Zeke knows that he's being listened to. So I'm not sure, but that's what it seemed like to me when I figured it out. What McGath might have been talking about as well as what Reiner might have been thinking. So yeah. As far as the animation quality, the animation was good. The rotoscoping, again, it seemed odd at first, but I got used to it very quickly. After watching the episode a couple times, I'm like, I get used to it. It's not that bad. So, yeah, not the big of a deal. Other than that, I say Mappa's doing a really good job. And when it comes to the rotoscoping, they're not overdoing it. They seem to be placing it in certain places where they think they need it versus other places where they don't. So it's like a mix and match. I think it's blending very well. And as far as I'm concerned, I'll give the animation overall about a 9 out of 10. only because I had to get used to rotoscoping first, but now I'm pretty much okay with it. So yeah, best thing about the episode, in my opinion, is I really like how in this episode it was slowing everything down and breaking down the character development a little bit more, showing the mentality of different characters and how they interact with each other, as well as their environment and their motivations within this particular universe. We saw whatever quirky thing or dark elements or bright elements was going on in that character's head as they develop. Very good writing. The worst thing about the episode was there's really nothing wrong with the episode, in my opinion. The only thing I thought was kind of weird was that scene where they're getting drunk on the train, as well as getting used to the rotoscoping. But other than that, the episode was pretty solid. My favorite scene, I would say there was two. My first favorite scene, I would say, is when Reiner is meeting up with the 4 cadets on the pier, and he briefly sees like a kind of a flashback of his comrades when he was training, back when he was like 11 or so. And he sees a flashback of those 4 instead of the 4 children that are directly in front of him. And I believe that just adds another layer to who he really is as a character in the story and how he's still struggling with his life choices. Next favorite scene is the unintentionally funny scene where he tries so hard and somewhat fails to convince Gabby and his family of how bad the island devils were when he was eating with them, or when he was living with them, when he was training with them. And it wasn't all the way convincing, yet oddly kind of funny in a dark, twisted way. As far as a 1 to 10 score, I'd give this episode about a 9 out of 10. It was less action-packed, but very character-driven. And we need episodes like this. We need episodes that can slow things down and flesh things out a little bit. If that's done the right way, it just tells the story that much better, rather than action in every single episode. Overall summary, I really like this slower paced episode that showed us what each character was like, or what each of the characters were like when they're not fighting, how they interact with each other, and how they handle themselves in a slightly more civilian setting. I liked it. It's always good to have an episode like this that balances out the more intense action episodes of the series. And I think it was relatively solid, pretty good. Some quirky things here and there, but overall solid. And with that being said, that's all for now. Please like, subscribe, share, and donate to support this channel. You all have a nice day. I'm out. Peace.